Okay, so you're thinking about taking the ABCTE PTK, right? Big step.
Hmm.
And you're here with us because you don't want to just squeak by.
You want to like own that exam walk-in feeling totally confident.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we get that, which is why we did a deep dive into all the prep materials out there for this exam.
We really want to boil it down to like what you absolutely need to know.
And some strategies that are going to set you apart.
So we're going to be talking about all those key areas the PTK covers, instructional design and delivery,
Classroom management.
assessment and evaluation.
And of course, that big one, professionalism.
But we're going deeper than just surface level definitions here.
Oh yeah, this is about moving beyond just knowing the terms. It's about like really showing you can apply those teaching principles in a real classroom.
And you know what? One thing that really stood out to me from all these resources was the emphasis on student-centered learning.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It seems like that's becoming like the gold standard in teaching these days.
Well, and for good reason, instead of that like traditional model where the teacher is just lecturing at the front of the room.
Right. Students are just passively absorbing information.
Exactly. Student-centered learning flips that dynamic completely.
So now the teacher becomes more of a facilitator, right?
Yeah, guiding students to learn and discover things for themselves.
We're talking about things like inquiry-based learning, where students come up with their own questions and then like investigate to find the answers.
And project-based learning, where students work on these in-depth projects over time.
So like imagine instead of just lecturing about ecosystems.
You have your students actually build models of different ecosystems.
Oh, wow. So they're not just hearing about it. They're like getting their hands dirty.
Literally, and they have to figure out how all the different parts interact.
And then explain it all back to you.
Exactly. So, think about it. If you were taking the PTK exam and you could talk about how you use those kinds of active learning strategies in your classroom.
That would definitely show a deeper level of understanding.
Now, another area we really dug into was classroom management. And this is huge
That
because
makes such a difference.
if you can't manage your classroom effectively, everything else kind of falls apart.
You can't teach if your students are constantly disrupting each other.
Exactly. And the resources we looked at stress that it's not just about discipline.
It's bigger than that, right?
It's about creating this like positive and structured learning environment from day one.
Where students feel safe and respected and ready to learn.
And one thing that kept popping up was this 3-step rule for classroom management.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these 3 steps.
So step 1 is setting super clear expectations.
Like no ambiguity whatsoever.
Right. Students need to know exactly what you expect from them in terms of behavior,
Participation.
how they engage in learning activities, the whole 9 yards.
Step 2 is consistently reinforcing positive behavior.
Catching kids doing the right thing and acknowledging it.
Oh, I love that. And it doesn't have to be anything big, right?
Yeah. Nope. Even just a quick verbal acknowledgement or a smile can go a long way.
Yeah, it's about focusing on what they're doing well.
And then step 3 is addressing disruptions consistently and fairly.
Okay, so this is where the discipline part comes in.
It is, but it doesn't mean you have to come down hard on every little thing.
Right. It's more about having clear procedures in place.
And applying those procedures fairly to everyone.
So everyone knows what to expect.
And they know you're going to be consistent.
Consistency is key, I think, in so many aspects of teaching.
Oh, totally. It builds trust and helps students feel like they're being treated fairly.
Okay, so to recap on classroom management, we have clear expectations
Positive reinforcement.
and consistent responses to disruptions.
Now, once you've got that solid foundation in place,
How do you know if your students are actually learning what you're teaching?
that brings us to assessment.
Which the resources broke down into 2 main types: formative and summative.
And this is a really important distinction to understand.
So formative assessment is like checking for understanding along the way, right?
During the learning process, exactly.
So things like quick quizzes, exit tickets, think pair share activities.
All of that, the goal here isn't necessarily to give a grade.
It's more about getting a sense of where your students are at.
Are they grasping the concepts? Are they struggling? Are there any misconceptions you need to address?
It's like taking the temperature of the classroom as you go.
I love that analogy. And then summative assessment comes at the end.
So that's when you're evaluating what students have learned after a unit or a whole course.
Your unit tests, your big projects, that kind of thing.
Okay, so formative is during learning, summative is at the end.
I think that's a good way to remember it.
And one thing the resources really emphasized was the power of formative assessment.
You know why wait until the end of a unit to find out your students are lost?
Right. Those frequent check-ins give you a chance to catch problems early on.
And adjust your teaching accordingly.
like a pilot constantly checking the instruments during a flight.
Rather than waiting until they land to see if they're in the right spot.
Makes perfect sense. Now, another big topic was differentiation, which is all about recognizing that.
Every student is different.
They learn at different paces, they have different strengths and weaknesses.
And different learning styles.
So a one-size-fits-all approach just isn't going to cut it.
Not at all. Differentiation is about tailoring your teaching to meet those individual needs.
So you might use visual aids for visual learners.
Hands-on activities for kinesthetic learners.
Technology tools to provide different pathways to learning.
The resources gave a great example of offering an audiobook version of a text.
For a student who struggles with reading.
It's about making sure all students have access to the same content.
Just present it in a way that works for them.
And it's not about lowering expectations for anyone.
It's about giving everyone the support they need to succeed.
Okay, so we've covered some really important advanced teaching strategies.
But now let's talk about something that I know a lot of people get stressed about.
Those constructed response questions on the PTK.
Yes, they can be tough.
Because it's not just about knowing the content, you have to be able to explain your thinking.
In a clear and concise way.
And the resources we looked at recommended using a framework like the STAR method.
STAR as in situation, task, action, result, right?
You got it. It's a great way to structure your answers to those scenario-based questions.
Well, let's say the question is, how would you handle a student who consistently disrupts the class?
A weak answer might be something like, I would tell them to stop and maybe call their parents.
Which is like, yeah, okay, but it's very surface level.
Right. It doesn't really show a deep understanding of classroom management strategies.
So let's see how we could use the STAR method to give a much stronger answer.
Okay, so first you describe the situation.
A student in my third grade class is constantly talking out of turn, distracting others, and not completing their work.
Then you'd state the task.
My goal is to redirect this student's behavior and help them get back on track academically while maintaining a positive learning environment for everyone.
Now you outline the action you would take.
I would start by having a private conversation with the student to try and understand why they're acting out.
Then I might implement a behavior chart with clear rewards for positive behavior.
And I'd make sure to provide plenty of positive reinforcement when the student is on task.
And finally, you describe the result.
Over time, the student's disruptive behavior decreases. They start participating more in class, and their grades improve.
See how much more detailed and comprehensive that is?
It shows you've really thought through the situation.
And you have a plan for addressing it effectively.
The STAR method is a great tool I think we should all have in our back pockets.
Now let's wrap up with some general pro tips for the exam itself.
Like how to approach it mentally and practically.
One thing that's absolutely crucial is to practice under test conditions.
Yeah, take some full-length practice exams.
Time yourself, stick to the time limits, really simulate the experience.
That way you're not caught off guard on test day.
And pacing is super important.
Don't get bogged down on one question.
If you're struggling, make your best guess, mark it, and move on.
You can always come back to it if you have time at the end.
And above all, believe in yourself.
You've put in the work, you've studied hard, you got this.
And don't forget the basics.
Oh yeah, the stuff we all know we should do, but sometimes forget.
Get a good night's sleep before the exam.
Stay hydrated, eat a healthy breakfast.
Your brain will thank you.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We've talked about those advanced teaching strategies that will really make you shine.
Classroom management, assessment, differentiation.
And how to tackle those constructed response questions, like a pro.
Remember, thorough preparation is key.
It builds confidence, and confidence leads to success.
So as you continue on your journey towards becoming a certified teacher,
think about how you'll take all of these strategies and make them your own.
How will you create a classroom where every student feels supported and challenged?
How will you keep learning and growing as an educator throughout your career?
Because ultimately, that's what it's all about.
Inspiring a love of learning in your students.
And making a positive impact on their lives.
That's what being a great teacher is all about.
And we know you have the potential to be an amazing teacher.
So go out there and rock that PTK exam.
We believe in you.